Hey everyone, welcome back to The Girl with the Shovel. I am Angela, and today we are going to be repotting an orchid. Now first, to see if your orchid is ready to be repotted, there are 5 signs that you should repot your orchid. First is if your roots are spilling out of the pot. Now I'll show you, these aren't the aerial roots. Aerial roots coming out of the pot are fine. It's the lower down roots. If these guys are coming out, then it's definitely a sign that it's time to repot. Second is if your bark or whatever soil it's in, if it starts to break down. So this also will kind of expose the roots on top. So you'll see that a little bit. But if the bark or the soil, honestly, if it's in soil, you definitely need to repot it. And then if it's in bark, but the bark will start to kind of break down over time. So if that's starting to sink a little bit, it's a sign that it's breaking down. So it's time to get it into some fresh soil, time to repot. And then the third sign is if you're watering it and the water just runs straight down and out and it's not going into the pot. Okay, that is basically you have some issues and it will all be fixed by repotting your orchid. Then fourth, if your orchid is not in an orchid pot, you'll need to repot it, or I mean, you don't need to, but it's really smart to repot it. You'll have a much healthier orchid. I'll show you the difference between a regular pot and an orchid pot here. That's actually why I'm going to be repotting. This guy is just in a regular pot and my shipment came in, so I finally got an orchid pot for it, so I'll be switching that over. And then last, if your orchid has just finished blooming, if you bought it from a store and it was blooming, wait until after it's done blooming, unless it's like majorly dying. If it's majorly dying, repot it, okay? But if it is done blooming, then you can go ahead and repot it into some fresh soil, probably a bigger pot. We'll, cover that as well. And it's just a good idea to pot it into some soil that you know what's in it, and then you could really get it off to a good start. And then a good rule of thumb is that your orchids will need to be repotted every 1 to 2 years. So most orchids can bloom if taken care of properly. Check out my video on orchid plant care if you have any questions. But most orchids can bloom every year, 2 if they're not getting as many nutrients as they need or as much sun as they need. But every year with a bloom, then you can think about repotting every bloom or every other bloom. But remember, after the bloom, not during the bloom. Okay, that's important. Don't mess it up when it's doing its thing. Okay, so the 3 main things that you're going to need to repot your orchid is first, you're going to need an orchid pot. I highly, highly, highly recommend these because they are specifically made so that they have these slots in them so that there is better airflow around the roots, okay? Because remember, our orchids are epiphytes, so they're used to having a lot of air flow around their roots. Talk more about that later, my little plant nerd self, but these have extra holes in them to provide that airflow. You can also find some good orchid pots on Amazon. They also sell ceramic ones, and you'll actually see those roots kind of leaving the pot and wrapping around, kind of like it's almost its own little tree that it's wrapping around. If you don't like the look of those roots, go ahead and get one of these plastic pots, and then you can get a bigger pot to put it in, like a little more decorative pot. I would recommend that you get something a little more sturdy, like another ceramic pot to put it in, because I've noticed with plastic pots, like over here, this is what my orchid came in. It's this like tiny little plastic pot. Okay, and it is not heavy enough, and this orchid has been tipping and falling over like crazy. So as soon as it's done blooming, we're definitely repotting this guy, but make sure that you have, if you go with this plastic pot here, then Then make sure that you have a bigger pot to put it in, something with a little more weight to it, so that when it blooms, it doesn't fall over. And then the second thing that you will need is some orchid bark. I just have a typical Miracle-Gro orchid bark potting mix that I'll be using. You can buy other brands. It's mainly just orchid bark in there. This one does contain a little bit of fertilizer as well, but you'll see I just use it and it's been fine for me. And then I fertilize my orchids in addition to that, and I just keep it pretty light. And then you're probably gonna want some scissors or pruning shears so that you can go through during the root phase and remove any roots that may have died. So step one is to remove your orchid from the pot. Now, I've got this pot in this other pot. Now you can see that if it's in soil, it might be a little difficult, but I've already got this in an orchid mix. So it's just gonna come right out here. And then step two is to inspect the roots and remove any that are just old looking, okay? It's like withered and dry, or if they have like mushy or soggy roots. Okay, so some of this right here, this needs to be removed. That's definitely not good. That's because it wasn't in an orchid pot, you know, it didn't have that airflow. So I'm really glad that I bought some more. I was out and I just had to get some more. And now this guy is ready to go. And then also if there are any like shriveled, you'll see kind of some shriveled dry roots, those you should also remove. So I'm going to take this one off. This one is kind of shriveled right here. And this end is not doing good. So the yellowish is not the greatest sign. Ultimately, I want them to all be this nice green color. Okay, we want nice green and silvery leaves. So this will definitely like the other pot more, the orchid pot. And then hopefully it'll help it green up a little bit more once it gets more oxygen. I'm also gonna remove this one here. Little tip right here that's dried up. Okay, now two quick things is first, you'll want to notice that you'll have roots on your plant and then you'll also have these aerial roots. So you'll notice that there is a crown of the plant, which is right here, right where the leaves start, and below that is just the regular roots. And then above it, we're actually seeing these other roots. These are called aerial roots. These go above the plant. Let me show you here. So these ones kind of come up, and we've got several here. There's one right through here. And you see it's above the crown. It's right here. So these are aerial roots. They actually get moisture from the air, so they don't want to be potted. They don't want to be in any soil. Leave that for the lower roots, but don't worry about the upper ones. They'll just kind of do their thing. So step 3 is then to pot your plant in the new soil. So I'm going to get my new soil here, add a little bit into the bottom of the pot. Just kind of hold it up a little bit. Okay, and like I said, there's the crown, right? So we don't want to put more bark over the crown. We want that to be like the top of our soil line, right? Our non-soil soil line, right? And I'm gonna keep these aerial roots out. I'm gonna start filling in around them. Okay, and I mean, if your aerial roots go in the soil, it isn't the worst thing since you're doing a very light soil with the orchid mix, right? You're using orchid mix, I really, really hope. These ones are just too big. There we go, moving them. Another quick tip is if your roots aren't moving well, like they're really stiff and you start like snapping them, That's not good, first off. Your plant won't like that. But you can soak it in water for about 10-20 minutes. If you have it recently watered or recently soaked, then your roots will have lots of moisture in them, and that will be a lot easier. They'll be a little bit more flexible, okay? Now don't be like moving around like crazy, but they won't snap as easily if it's freshly watered. Okay, so here we go. A little bit more. Okay, now notice a few things. First, I'm not burying the crown, okay? The crown will rot. It won't do well if we're burying it, okay? So I'm putting the soil right up to that first leaf, okay? The bottom of that first leaf. So that's about right there, okay? Second, I'm not burying these aerial roots. I'm letting them just kind of do their thing. And third, I'm not packing it in, okay? We still need those air pockets. We want that airflow. So I'm kind of pushing it a little bit, like to just settle it in so it isn't loose, but I'm not forcing and compacting it in, okay? The orchid bark will do great in creating those air pockets, but we also want to make sure that we're not making it worse. And honestly, you could break some of the roots if you pack it in too hard. So step 4 is you're going to want to take care of your orchid a little differently right after repotting. Okay, so first is, especially if you've taken off a lot of the roots, I would wait at least a day before watering, okay? Because if you have really fresh cuts on your roots, it's really open to bacteria, and if you water it, it could just increase your chances of bacterial root rot getting in there. So give it a day for those cuts to kind of seal, and then feel free to water it like normal. Put it in lots of bright indirect light. And if you have any more questions, once again, I'll leave the link in the description below to my orchid plant care. I am working on also how to re-bloom your orchid for if you're having issues getting your orchid to bloom again. I know that's why we buy them in the first place. I'll also leave the link to that in the description below. So that is it. I might put it back in this pot for now. I'm gonna see what other heavier pots I've got, and I will replace that. But that is how to repot your orchid. And then one final tip is if your orchid, like mine, is kind of leaning, you may need to stake it for a few weeks while it kind of gets its roots into its new home. I know everything is nice and light and airy, and that doesn't always hold things in well. So consider just putting a stake in it just to hold it up just for a few weeks, and then you should be able to remove it. And then if you have a houseplant that may be struggling, check out the Plant Rescue Kit. It's a free downloadable guide that I've made to help you guys out with your houseplants. Check those out. You can get some great tips, some great kind of step-by-step troubleshooting guide to how to save your plant that maybe isn't looking that great. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.